this approach works because that's the most effective way to develop your wine palate without breaking the bank, because it's not about buying, expensive Bordeaux wines. It's really about training your sense of smell and taste with wine components that you may find in different wine styles. I haven't introduced myself yet. My name is Isabelle Lesschaeve. I'm a sensory scientist by training, have a lot of experience in my profession as a professor, as an academic researcher, but also as a corporate researcher working in beverage industries and the wine industry. And my passion has always been to educate people about sensory perceptions, and I love wine. So I created this company called InnoVinum Academy to really help you wine enthusiasts, but also wine professionals to develop their palates through sensory practices. And I'm your tasting coach and trusted tasting coach so that I can help you really achieve your goal in improving your ability to describe precisely what you sense when you smell and taste a glass of wine. I have prepared a presentation that I will take you through about what makes Cabernet Sauvignon special. This class is really part of our Curious Palate tasting community, where our members are developing their tasting skills one wine style at a time, and this is the process we are going through. I hope you get some great insights out of this class, and maybe you would consider joining our free community. So why is this class different from what you are used to? This class is the beginning of a process that we have inside our Curious Palates community, which is to develop and train our senses through sensory practice, through sensory training. And I will give you an overview of what it looks like. So as part of this monthly training, where we want to learn about a wine style with sensory practice, the goal is really to give you some perspectives and direction so that you can really awaken your senses and train not only your sense of smell and your sense of taste, but also your brain to identify those typical sensory attributes of Cabernet Sauvignon. So when I say sensory attributes, I mean, what it smells like, what it tastes like, what it feels like in your mouth. And really the goal is that at the end of the monthly training, you can evaluate Cabernet Sauvignon based on what you sense and not what you are supposed to sense. Like, what you read in the books, or, if you're taking any wine education classes, they usually give you a lot of information about the wine and a list of descriptors that you should expect in a wine, in a particular varietal wine like Cabernet Sauvignon. But here, my goal is really to let the wine speak to your senses and that you become more comfortable describing what you feel, what you smell, what you taste, with your own words and based on your experience and your unique skills. So again, it's a different approach, but it works. And I think it's very important that this approach works because it's with consistent sensory practice that you can really develop your wine palate effectively. That's the most effective way to develop your wine palate without breaking the bank, because it's not about buying, expensive Bordeaux wines. It's really about training your sense of smell and taste with wine components that you may find in different wine styles. And I want you to become more confident about what you sense and what you taste. So it's not about tasting a lot of wine. It's about consistent, structured training to train your sense of smell and taste using those sensory-driven techniques. So this is what the monthly sensory practice looks like. We're here today building the foundation, understanding where all these perceptions come from in a wine. And this month it's about Cabernet Sauvignon. And then towards the end of the presentation, we'll talk about how you can implement the sensory training at home, with us inside the community or by yourself. You will have, directions on how to do that. All right, so let's start our deep dive into the world of Cabernet Sauvignon. And I know this is a varietal name that is difficult to pronounce. And being French, it's funny because I can hear myself, Americanize it, because in French we would say Cabernet Sauvignon. And I know the Nyon is difficult to pronounce for non-French native. So sometimes I would just say Cabernet, but it refers to Cabernet Sauvignon. We'll talk about the anatomy and the architecture of the grape variety, what it brings to the wine. Of course, we'll talk about the influences that terroir, winemaking, and also I want to touch on regulation, more like when you see Cabernet Sauvignon on the label, what does it really mean, depending on where the wine is coming from. We will summarize this information into a visual. I'm very visual, and I find it works for a lot of people. So I like to have this summary on one page. And then the last part will be to look at the process to develop our sensory practice. What I'm sharing with you is, of course, based on what I know, but as you may know, I'm not a sommelier, I'm not a winemaker, I'm a sensory scientist, but I did some research and look at about 71 publications. I used AI to help me. I read most of it, but I summarize with some tools. But I created this report that really is comprehensive on what we know today, what the researchers have worked on in terms of Cabernet Sauvignon sensory qualities, and what are the influences that affect our perceptions when we taste a Cabernet Sauvignon. So the class objective on those sections that we are going to go through is first to help you decode the sensory perceptions that you're having when you smell or taste a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon. We'll explore the aromas and the flavors' origin and how they translate into the glass. If you smell forest floor, where does it come from? Or if you smell dill, like it happened to me recently, where does it come from? You may not need to know where does it come from, but I think it helps also understand, when you read the back label of a bottle, when you are shopping, to have this kind of background knowledge to ask questions and understand what you like or don't like in a particular varietal wine. It's not for you to become an expert unless you want to be, but it's more to give you some directions and pointers on how you can choose wines that you will enjoy. So that's the first point. The second point, as I alluded to earlier, is to give you some practical framework to navigate the regional and legal clues and help you shop wisely and to develop your palate. That's the main objective, but you need a bit of background in order to achieve that and to do the monthly training. And you may have seen this map. This is a visual that represents really the sensory architecture of Cabernet Sauvignon. There are lots of white space, and we are going to fill these spaces together, and I will drop the complete map in our community so that you have it. But this is really where we are aiming to really understand what is the varietal blueprint of Cabernet Sauvignon in terms of the core, a particular marker, and the impact of the structure, and what are those modulators in terms of climate, techniques, winemaking techniques, and aging.